Hey, Boneheads, Ryan Howard here. Um, I want to make a little bit of a different video today. And don't worry, this is not one of those YouTuber apologizes video or YouTuber talks about his personal life. Uh, this is a video that's very relevant to what I do here on Rollin' Bones. This is a video where I am going to take you guys through essentially my story of being a fan, an enjoyer of role playing games, and talk about how my tastes have changed and kind of where I am these days. A lot of you who've been around for a while have probably noticed several changes in my outlook on role playing. And there's a good reason for that. And a lot of that comes down to talking to different people, actually reading and engaging with other role-playing games besides what I started with, which was D&D 5th edition, and discovering what works best for me and ultimately what I think works best, full stop. Because I do actually believe that there is some kind of objective reality to how role-playing should be experienced. And I think people who deny that uh, haven't tried other ways of role playing. They haven't gone beyond what they're currently doing because they think it works well enough. And maybe you are having fun role playing in a certain way, but I don't know that you could say that another way would be worse for you, or at least not be better than what you're currently doing, because you've never even tried it. You've not tried role playing in the way that, someone like Jeffro Johnson says is objectively correct. And really, I think that's a demonstration of growth on my part, that I've been willing to look at other ways of play, look at how other people have enjoyed this game, how other people are having fun, and find ultimately kind of the telos, or the core purpose, the heart of what role playing should be. And so this is going to be kind of a rambly video. I'm not going to do many edits. I'm just going to talk. I'm just going to talk and kind of work through some of my thoughts. And hopefully this is something that you guys will find some kind of value or entertainment in. If nothing else, this is something that you can put on while you're not looking at YouTube. This is something that you could, stick your phone in your pocket, set it on your desk somewhere, and listen to me talk through this stuff while you do chores, or, something like that. Anyway, let me begin at the beginning. I started being interested in role-playing games when I was probably about 16 or 17 years old. I had already kind of established that I was into fantasy, science fiction, comic books, all that stuff. And so I saw that a lot of the people who were into these things also played role-playing games. However, my mother was not willing to let me try D&D. My mom grew up in the religious 80s and still kind of saw D&D as the devil's game. This is a very familiar story for a lot of you out there. I know, like my friend, the Basic Expert, has a very similar background as far as his religious family not wanting him to play Dungeons and Dragons just because of the reputation that it had. Anyway, time passes. I am now at this point 18, 19 years old. I'm in college. I can do whatever I want at this point. And so I decide I want to try this D&D thing. I didn't know anything about it, and I was looking into it, and 5th edition had just come out. This was 2015, so I don't even think there was a single splat book available for 5th edition yet. I think it was still just the core rule books and some adventures. Sword Coast came out a year into me playing games. So that's where I found myself, was right at the beginning of 5th edition's life cycle. And I, went online and found myself an in-person group. I played a couple sessions with them. That group didn't really work out. Scheduling never really came together, but I was hooked on RPGs immediately. I was immediately very comfortable role playing. I was there instantaneously. I was role playing. I was, talking in character. I still had a learning curve as far as the rules, but in interfacing with the game as a role player, I was already there. And I do attribute this a lot to my theater background. I know people are going to say, actors in role play. I've made the same joke, failed actors in role playing games. I know it's not improv theater. I know there's a difference. However, being an actor and being in theater does prepare you to place your mind and place your thoughts, place your consciousness and your perceptions into another person already off the bat. Like that's not an issue for you if you've ever been in a play or if you've ever done any kind of improv or acting or anything like that. That's the essence of acting, is you are embodying a different person in a different place in a different time and reacting to what they are experiencing honestly, using all the information that you have as them. So it's very easy to port this over into role playing, and I took to role playing like a fish to water. It was really just that natural. I was hooked immediately. So eventually I do find a group that's steady, and I am with this group for 3 years, maybe even 4 years. I think I made it a full 4 years with this group, all throughout the rest of college, all up until I moved from Charlotte to Nashville. I was with the same group. This is where I went from level 1 to level 20 for the first time. This is where I DM'd for the first time and took my first group from level 1 to level 20. These are people who I held very dear and still hold very dear. They were, all of them, at my wedding. 2 of them were in my wedding. These were, for a time, the best friends in the world to me. And I met them through role playing. Still, we were playing 5th edition. And again, we were having fun. If I go back to that time, we were having so much fun playing 5th edition. I didn't even think there was a purpose at looking at any other game system because 5e was just that much fun to me. Now, I did start to look at other game systems because specifically I wanted to run Star Wars games and I wanted to run Western games. So that's how I first got introduced to Saga Edition, which eventually led me to pick up, Star Wars D6. And that's also where I got introduced to Savage Worlds and Deadlands, which I still hold very dear to me today. However, fantasy-wise, my thoughts were always, why anything other than D&D, and specifically why anything other than 5e? Why would I want to try to calculate THAC0? Why would I do any of those old things that are no longer in the book? Because we have this 5th edition rule set for a reason. Why would I need anything else? Professionals designed this thing. I didn't think there was any need for it. Then I moved to Nashville, and now I'm separate from my gaming group. I am trying to kind of get things back together as far as my gaming life is concerned. I'm a newlywed. I live in a new city, new job, all that stuff. And so I'm trying to find my feet, and I'm trying to run a 5th edition game for a new group. And this is really where I start to feel some of the contradictions of 5th edition. This is really where I start to feel like 5e isn't doing it for me, and these players aren't getting it. At first, I thought it was the players. I've come to realize that the game is not good for introducing players to role-playing. There's too many options. There's too much to do. It's too slow. It's too much of a slog. 5th edition is not a good game for newcomers. I don't know how I did it. I don't know how, a whole bunch of people who I taught to play or who played alongside me and learned alongside me, how they learned through 5th edition. I don't understand how I did it. I don't know how anyone does it anymore. I don't teach people to play with 5th edition anymore. If I'm going to teach someone to play with any edition, it'll be either OD&D, BX, like old school essentials, or I'll teach them dungeon crawl classics, because those games are mechanically breezy enough that you can just pretty much dive right in and not really have to go over a lot of rules. There's not a lot of options. There's not subclasses, feats, all the different choices that you have to make. It's a lot easier just to teach someone the basics and then start playing the game. And when you're first learning role playing, that's what you want to do. That's how you want to begin your journey, is how quickly can we actually play this darn game instead of sitting here deciding what kind of wizard I want to be. Now, you're just a wizard. You cast a spell. When you do, you roll this dice, you see your result on the table, and that's what happens. That's a whole lot more simple. But I'm starting to, feel that 5th edition isn't the game for me. I do hook up with another group where I'm again playing 5th edition. We had a lot of fun. That group was made up of a whole bunch of just veteran players. And so a lot of the problems of 5th edition weren't present because, veteran players, these guys really knew their stuff. They knew the rules. I knew the rules at this point, and so I was a player in a campaign, and then I started running Dark Sun in 5th edition. I would not ever do that again. If I were going to run Dark Sun, I would either use, again, old school essentials or Dungeon Crawl Classics, because those rule sets, I think, work the best for Dark Sun, unless I wanted to run in AD&D 2nd edition, which I've played 2nd edition now. Don't really know that I would want to do that. I know that's the native system for it. I'm not a big fan of AD&D 2nd edition. Just putting that out there. Sorry, 2E fans, not my cup of tea. I prefer BX. I prefer BECME, Dungeon Crawl Classics. That's where my tastes lie. I'm not a big 2nd edition fan. Anyway, I'm having fun. I'm enjoying it. And then right around that point, COVID hits. And now I'm not playing every week like I was. My group went online. And so we're playing online. It's not the same. It's not the same as playing in person. And this is where I really start to find my opinions on role playing solidify. I know almost immediately, just from my experience of playing and how it's changed, especially my experience as a game master. Running a game online is not the same as running a game in person. There's an energy that comes from running a game in person, and that energy is not at all present online. There's not this looking into each other's eyes and knowing that what you're doing is fun online. There's not this feeling of energy that you get from your players when they're really getting stuck into your world. That's not present online, at least not for me. I haven't figured out how to capture that. So I'm starting to, lose the high of in-person DMing. And as I'm losing this high of running the game in person, I'm also seeing this 5th edition thing really isn't all it's cracked up to be. I'm not enjoying this game as much. A lot of the things that distracted me from the weaknesses of 5th edition are gone. So I'm starting to see this game for what it is. It's too slow. It's too bloated. I don't like it anymore. And also at this time, I'm really ramping up Rollin' Bones. This is where we went from just being an audio podcast to doing a live element. This is where I feel like I really started to hit my stride as an interviewer. And this is where I'm really starting to get some great guests on the show and really have some good conversations. And it was my first conversation with Levi Combs, where I was exposed to a lot of different kinds of games. And, forming that relationship with Levi, with Skeeter Green, with Casey Christopherson, Zach Glazer. Once I started talking to these people who were entrenched in this OSR movement and started to get a feeling for what OSR was, that's when my tastes really started to shift. And I knew that I was not a 5e gamer anymore. Now, my tastes really dramatically shift in 2021 when I go to my first North Texas RPG convention. It's at North Texas where I play Dungeon Crawl Classics and Mutant Crawl Classics for the first time. And I immediately go to the dealer's room and I buy the book and I buy the dice. And I was, a born again OSR gamer. At this point, I was full on into the OSR, and I patronized every single OSR creator that I talked to. I bought books like Hyperborea because of this. And Hyperborea is a great game. I'm going to pivot here away from the OSR, but Hyperborea is a fantastic game, and so is Dungeon Crawl Classics and Mutant Crawl Classics. Weird Frontiers, also a fantastic game. It's at North Texas where I really start to explore what this whole game thing means. It's also really where I start looking past modern games and looking past this recency bias of, oh, the most recent edition is the best edition because it's the most recent. They only took away bad things or clunky things. All they've ever done is streamline. All they've done is make the best possible game ever. That's all that the edition process is. It has nothing to do with marketing. It's just about making a better game. That all went out the door. And I started to look at these older rule sets. I started to examine why, these things like low hit points, rolling 3d6 in order. Why was this the status quo to start with? And then I started to realize part of my problem with 5th edition is you are so powerful. And part of what I like about these OSR games is you're so not powerful to start with. You have to become powerful. You have to amass power. You have to become somebody. Whereas in 5th edition and Pathfinder and a lot of modern games, you already start as someone. And so this is where my mind starts to go, where my imagination starts to go. This is also where I begin to dive into Appendix N and start to also dive into my own history. Because as I'm reading Appendix N, this is where, I start to learn things about Robert E. Howard, and I start to wonder if I'm related to him. I do my whole long research and find out that, yes, I am distantly related to Robert E. Howard, and I was very excited about that. I am still very excited about that. You guys who watch this already know all of this. But, now it's a personal connection. I am personally connected to this Appendix N stuff that people talk so much about. It's in my DNA, it's in my blood. So now understanding games in this kind of sword and sorcery, really gritty, dark fantasy way, it's a matter of family to me. And I start to get connected with people who are like-minded. I start to move beyond kind of my frog god connections and the people in that orbit. And this is where I start to talk with people like Alex Macrease and the Basic Expert and Victor Gorchev and Crafty Matt and Crossface. And now I start to kind of broaden my horizons and get to talk to people who are smarter than me. Every designer who I talk to is smarter than me. These are my betters. And I genuinely believe that. I'm not just saying that. These are people who've thought more about role-playing games than I have and understand more about role-playing games than I understand. They've read more rules than I have. And, this makes them more literate. And so I start to think, how can I become more like these guys whose work I admire so much? And so, I have to dig into the rules. I have to start figuring out these old editions, this BX, this AD&D 1E that all of these games are built on. As I'm really starting to get into this, though, this is where I hook up with Valor Studios, and I get really stuck into the Savage Worlds side of things. And that's where, for about 6 to 8 months, Roll and Bones kind of vanishes for a little bit. That's because I was doing it over on Valor Studios YouTube channel. I have all those episodes. I should upload them at some point. There's some good interviews in there, including my second interview with Professor Dungeon Master, where he and Hanker and Fernell and I talk about really, like, there's no set topic. We're just talking. It was a great conversation, though. That's where I had a great conversation with the Hickmans. And that's also where I had my second conversation with Alex Macrease, where we were talking about Buy This Axe. However, I was not feeling what they were doing over at Valor Studios because they were focused on actual play. And I was focused on talking to designers and preparing my mind to become a designer myself. And so that's why we parted company. That's why I'm not with them anymore. And that was the best decision I could have made, because they weren't feeling my vibe. I wasn't feeling their vibe. There's no hard feelings there. I certainly had my disagreements with them at times, but, again, that's all in the past. And that brings us kind of to the present. So when I leave Valor Studios, I'm still very much in this OSR mindset. I'm still on fire for the OSR. However, at the beginning of this year, things really started to change, because a lot of my friends who were originally at odds with the BroSR, that's the Jeffro Johnson B-dubs clique that you see on Twitter, those of you who go on RPG Twitter, that's the BroSR. And what they believe in is essentially bringing the game back to this kind of essential state that it began at, to bring role-playing and wargaming back into harmony with each other, and to run the game very similarly to how you see when you watch Secrets of Blackmoor, when you see them running the Bronstein, or the Bronstein, as Victor Gorchev corrected me on the other day. That's what they want. They want this heavy faction play that's driven very much by the players and not the GM. And they want, to see these big shared campaign worlds and these eternal campaigns that last forever and ever, because as your characters level up and become, epic level, they become patrons to new characters, and you have groups that are 50 people or more all running within the same world, and you have multiple judges, not just one game master, but multiple judges all working together in a shared world. That's what the BroSR wants. And along with that, that's where one-to-one time and strict timekeeping comes in, because you're managing at that point not just a campaign, but a world. And if you manage a world, you have to have some sense of time. That's the whole argument of one-to-one time, and why strict timekeeping is one of the most important aspects to them. And I agree with them on that. In fact, I agree with them on pretty much everything. And this came about because several friends of mine, including Crossface, including the Basic Expert, started to look into these rules and started to understand where the BroSR was coming from. Move aside that curtain of kayfabe, the term from wrestling that they borrow, and see what lies at the heart of their argument. And at the same time, Alex Macrease started doing Arbiter of Worlds here on YouTube and started walking through some of these same concepts. He and I had a third conversation talking about simulationism, because my heart very much cried out for simulation, but every time every time I brought up those ideas to someone, they said, well, that's just clunky. That's just clunky design. It's too slow. That's really gonna, hamper our story here. If you try to bring in all of the simulation to the game, all you're gonna do is kind of ruin the fun that we're having if you try to simulate every little thing. And honestly, that's a reduction in the argument. That's not at all what simulationism is. I'm not trying to perfectly simulate the wind speed velocity of an arrow and how, the wind affects it when, you let go of the air. So that's not what I'm trying to do here. What I'm trying to do is bring games and reality in alignment with each other so that there's not so much of a disconnect between what's happening in the game and what I know about reality. It's appealing to something I already understand, which is reality. And I think more people need to try that, because honestly, once things come in alignment with reality more so, you don't have as much of a problem with suspension of disbelief. You don't have as many people saying, well, in real life, because you're close enough to real life that, yes, we're in a world where magic and dragons exist, but physics wise, things are working out in such a way that it's not, making me scratch my head and go, well, why are we having to do it this way? It just makes things better, in my opinion. But McCree starts talking about a lot of these things too. A lot of the same stuff that the Bro SR is talking about. And, again, the Bro SR has the same reverence for Alex McCrease that I do. And really, I just have to stop my story here for a second and say, if you don't watch the Arbiter of Worlds YouTube channel, you really should. Because Alex McCrease is brilliant. He's a great designer. He is a great philosopher, both in the real world sense and the RPG sense. So if you don't watch his content, do yourself a favor and go ahead and watch it. So he and I have a conversation, and we start to discover that, or I start to discover that a lot of the stuff that I've written off is very important. A lot of the stuff that I thought was unimportant in role-playing games, I actually need to interface with, and I need to understand. And at that same time, the Basic Expert and Victor Gorchev had their disagreements with people in the OSR. We already did a stream on that. But the OSR has always been confounding to me, even when I was like I said, a born-again OSR believer. The OSR has always been a little bit strange to me, because it's always been presented as one thing, but it's not. It's multiple different groups all within each other, and no one can agree on what the true OSR is. And honestly, that's just what comes with trying to label yourself as a movement and trying to present yourself as some kind of front in the gaming world. And you always have this jockeying for power and position among people who value power and position. And ultimately, that's what the issues with the OSR came down to for me. I didn't want to see people jockeying for position over each other in the small movement, who can be the biggest fish in the small pond. Because Wizards of the Coast did something really messed up with their OGL fiasco. And suddenly this castle of the OSR, which was built on this foundation of the OGL, starts to crumble. There's a crack in the foundation. And so we can't continue to rely on just, the same rules over and over again, because that foundation is owned by someone else. And if it crumbles, they're not going to repair it for us. In fact, they may someday again decide to destroy that very foundation, and then the castle won't be able to stand anymore. So with this in mind, I start to look into other avenues and look at, how can I get away from, these OSR rule sets and find something that's going to be able to stand on its own. And so I start looking at Castles and Crusades. I continue my love for Dungeon Crawl Classics. And then once the Basic Expert and Victor had Jeffro on the show, I really started to hear kind of the Bro SR arguments. and understand them for the first time. And then I reached out to Jeffro. I invited him on Rollin' Bones, and he sent me a copy of this book, How to Win at D&D. And I will say this is an excerpt. This is not the full text. Jeffro is going to be releasing the full book sometime towards the end of this year, maybe early next year. He's working on it. But this book right here, this pamphlet, How to Win at D&D, is brilliant. It's brilliant. It is absolutely 100% brilliant. And this really changed things for me. Reading this book changed things for me. I am convinced by the Bro SR's arguments. I am convinced that the OSR is filled with good people, filled with great designers, great minds. But it's not a movement, and it doesn't have to be. There doesn't have to be some kind of unified movement against Wizards of the Coast. All we have to do is make good games, because they're not doing it anymore. All we have to do is make the best games that we possibly can. It doesn't matter what rule set. It doesn't matter, what at all. Is your game, how closely related is your game to BX or AD&D 1E? That doesn't matter at all. There's some great games out there that have nothing to do with it. There's some great games like Axe that are built on it, but expand so far beyond it that, at this point, to call Axe a BX clone is to miss the mark. There are games like Cowpunchers that are built on dice pool systems. There are games like Atomic Punk. I'm double dipping on Basic Expert, but he's a good guy, and I want you guys to buy his books that are not built on the OD&D or the BX platform. Dungeon Crawl Classics has nothing to do with BX. There's some mechanics that it shares with BX, but it's not built on the back of BX. Siege, the Castles and Crusades engine. Again, it's kind of a modern iteration on second edition. It's very much what a third edition of D&D would be if Gary Gygax had designed it. I think is kind of the essence of Castles and Crusades. But it's not OSR. And so playing on that OSR playground is no longer a priority for me. I still like those games. I still love Hyperborea. I still like BX, BECME, Old School Essentials. Still love them. They're great games. But I don't feel the need to be tied down to OSR anymore. I don't feel the need to be tied down to any movement at all. I am a part of no movement. I agree with the Bro SR, and I am very sympathetic to them. I'll even use that hashtag. But I am not so stuck in one particular mindset that I will only run a certain game. I will run a game in any rule set that I think properly utilizes its setting, that doesn't create some kind of dissonance between system and setting. I don't feel the need to build everything on one game engine anymore. I will run a Savage Worlds game in Savage Worlds. I will run a BX game in BX. I will run Castles and Crusades and Castles and Crusades. I'm not going to try and force different systems into each other anymore, because I'm not ideologically tied to any particular style of game anymore. I am tied to the best rule set for the type of game that I'm trying to play. And the type of game that I want to run now is that Bro SR type of game. It's that Bronstein. It's that open sandbox campaign where the players decide where they want to go, what they want to do, and the world reacts to their choices. Now, the reason that I am tied to that game so much, that style of game, is that works best, not just for me and my schedule, but that's what works best. As a game master, I am not a storyteller. I am an arbitrator. I'm a judge. I make rulings. And I facilitate the reaction to the player's choices. So I handle the enemies that the players are running up against. I embody them. I am essentially the living reaction to their choices. And I am the one who goes to the rules and says, okay, based on these rules here, you can't do what you're trying to do right now. Or, you have to make this roll. And if the roll fails, I tell them it fails. And I tell them what happens when that roll fails. I'm not a storyteller. It's not my story. It's not even my world necessarily. Now, I created the world of Nighthaven and the world of Dareholm. I came up with all the lore and the backstory and stuff like that. But it's a world that I now share with my players, and their choices are going to make an impact on what happens in this world. I relinquish all ownership of the timeline of the world from when I set my players loose. And that is the best way to play the game, because that way the players know that what they're doing matters. That way the GM is not tied to trying to make a story work with players who have agency. I'm not railroading them. I'm not spending my time trying to write a fantasy novel with enough open endings that the players can, do stuff. I'm not making them interact with my characters. I can create a cool NPC, but if the players never encounter them, so what? Their paths never crossed. All I'm now responsible for as a game master is giving the player something to explore, guiding them through their exploration by rolling on tables so that they can find out what's out there, and actually running through the scenario that they create through their actions. I play the bad guys. I play the orcs that attack them when they, accidentally wander into orc territory. I build the dungeons for them. I fill those dungeons with treasure for them to find. And, I play the other nobles that they interact with, unless I'm doing patron play, in which case, I let the players interact with each other, the patrons and the players interact with each other, and just facilitate that myself as the arbitrator and the judge. That's the kind of game I want to run, because that's the kind of game that my players can get excited about, that I can get excited about, and where we can all feel like we have some kind of ownership over it. It's also the kind of game where I can put just a little bit of time into prep very early on. I can build out this world, fill it with people with agendas, and set my players loose. And I don't even have to fill it with, people with agendas. I can give those agendas over to other players and have them play patrons. It's a very freeing thing for me as a game master, and me as a husband and a father. I'm someone with limited time. So being able to streamline my prep process and not having to create some kind of intricate fantasy storyline for players to interact with, that is an unbelievable weight off my shoulders. Now, there are still issues. You still run into things like scheduling with players, or getting players who are used to this modern style of play to interact with this very new and very foreign style of play, and getting them to really understand what's going on here. I'm still working through that. Because while I believe there is an objectively correct way to play role-playing games, I am not someone who believes that perfect role-playing can be actually attained. I think it's a process. I think perfection in role-playing games is a lot like sanctification in Christianity. It is a continuous process towards better role-playing. There is this, again, telos, this perfect ideal of what role-playing is up here that we are all moving towards. And there's going to be bumps along the way. We're all going to stumble. We're all going to find various flaws in our approach or various flaws in our players' mindsets or things like that. We're all going to stumble. We're all going to have false starts. We're all going to have fumbles. We're all going to have issues. But the more we try, the closer we get to this ultimate grandiose ideal of what a role-playing game is. And that process of trying, that is role-playing. That is bringing us closer to this game that we have in our minds. So as long as we keep in our heads that no game will ever truly be 150% pure and perfect, that's just an ideal to strive for and to bring ourselves closer and closer to. I think that is the most healthy approach we can have to role-playing. That no, you will not ever achieve the perfect campaign, but you will get darn close. And the more you try, the more close you'll get to that Platonic ideal of role-playing, that telos of role-playing, that divine purpose of role-playing. And that's what we're striving for. And that's where a lot of my content now is going to be directing us towards this Platonic ideal of role-playing. And I know that I've been lax on content recently. I've been trying to get the Substack up and running, which it's now up and running. I've figured out kind of how to do that and do other things at the same time. I have not been making videos, except I made this one, and there'll be another one at the end of July about the fighter. And then schedule permitting, I hope to still continue to do 2 videos a month. If I can do more, I'll do more, but 2 videos a month is about the best I can hope for with my schedule. Again, I'm a husband and a father. I have a day job. I have a lot of responsibilities besides just this, but I will continue to make this content as long as people continue to enjoy what I'm doing. However, my content will be more focused on bringing us closer to this truth of role-playing, this Platonic ideal of role-playing. That's what I'm focused on now. And I do think that if you want an understanding of what that Platonic ideal of role-playing is, you should watch the film Secrets of Blackmore, and you should read How to Win at D&D by Jeffro Johnson. And Jeffro will be on the show at the beginning of August. And we'll be talking a lot about this, and a lot about the pursuit of this Platonic ideal, this objectively correct way to role play. And if you don't believe me, if you don't believe that there is some kind of objective reality to role playing, try the way that I am describing. Try to think through it. Try to create a game like it. The only way you can know whether or not what I'm talking about is true is to actually experience it. You can't just dismiss the idea. You have to try it in practice. You have to actually play the game to know whether or not this is the way the game is supposed to be played. You have to do the action. So try it. And you can try it with the approach of proving Jeffro or me or whoever wrong. But you have to actually play it. And I think if you do actually play it, I think if you do it right, if you actually do what I am telling you to do, or more accurately, what the Bro SR and Jeffro and Alex McCrease, what they're telling you to do, because I'm still low on my pursuit of the Platonic ideal. They're a lot further on the journey. than I am. I feel like I'm just starting in many ways. When you do what they're telling you to do, if you actually commit to it, I think you'll find that you are moving towards that objective reality, and that objective reality is indeed objective and true and good and worth pursuing. And so that's where I am on this journey, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. I'm pursuing the objective reality of role-playing now. I am not trying to tie myself to any particular ideology. I know I've said so many good things about the Bro SR in this video. It might sound like I'm one of them. Maybe I am. I don't know. But I'm not trying to tie myself to any particular labels or movements anymore these days. I'm a gamer. I'm a gamer who has a particular enjoyment of medieval realism and old school fantasy, Appendix N type fantasy, sword and sorcery specifically. That's what I am. I am not OSR, I am not Bro SR, I am not a 5e gamer. I'm a gamer. I'm a gamer pursuing the objective reality of gaming. And that's all that I want to be, and that's all that I want other people to be as well. So I hope you guys will join me. I hope I don't sound too full of shit. Honestly, I start talking about objective truth, and I don't know. Sometimes I feel like, who are you to talk about these things? Because again, I do feel like I have many intellectual superiors in the realm of gaming. But I'm pursuing what I think is the objective truth of role playing, and that's all I want to see people do now. I just want to see people make the best games they possibly can. And that's all I'm focused on. That's my ideological conviction, is to good gaming. Because this is not politics. This is not religion. This is gaming. This is fun. And I want to see everyone have the most fun possible. And I think that the most fun possible is to pursue, again, the objective reality of role-playing games and to discover what that is. Because I do believe there is one, and I do believe I've discovered it. Or at least I have read about where someone else has discovered it. So I hope you guys will continue to join me on this journey. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do enjoy this video, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts on this. I'm genuinely curious to hear what everyone's thoughts are on this. I know this has been rambly. I know this has been scattered and very focused on my personal story. If you enjoyed that thing, kind of, let me know. If you don't, then the next couple of videos will be more structured and less scattered and, again, less focused on me. So I do hope you guys will join me. Until next time, whether you rolled a 1 or 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard. Let's get after that objective reality of gaming, and I will see you guys next time.